Good day, class. Let's begin our conversation on Chapter 8, Designing and Evaluating Training Systems. The learning objectives: know how to conduct a training needs analysis, be aware of the various training methods, know how to conduct a training program, understand the psychological theory behind successful training, be able to evaluate the effectiveness of a training program. First, what is training? Well, it can be seen as a planned effort by an organization to facilitate the learning of job-related behavior on the part of its employees. Also, training is the systematic acquisition of skills, rules, concepts, or attitudes that result in improved performance. The role of training: money spent on training. Oftentimes, the importance of something depends on how much money people spend on it. According to the American Society for Training and Development, ASTD, and 2013 research, organizations spend $164 billion each year on training. Approximately 2% of payroll was spent on training, or $1,195 per employee. With spending all this money, there are a lot of things that need to go into consideration before doing so, such as direct costs. Direct training costs involves the following: designing, developing, delivering, and then evaluating the training. So what that basically means is that someone needs to design, come up with the ideas, interview with the subject matter experts, put the plan together, then to develop the materials and simulations and role plays, and then actually conduct or deliver the program, and then someone needs to evaluate it as well. With all this money being spent, it'd be a good idea to check to see if it's doing what it needs to do and if it's worthwhile. Do you receive a good return on your investment? There's also indirect training costs. Participant wages. Those participants who are in training class at the moment are not doing the work they were hired to do, but they still have to get paid. And the work that needs to be getting done, for example, if it's at a factory or something of that nature, we need to have replacement personnel filling in those empty slots. And then nothing happens without administrative work. So the setup for all the training is a great administrative cost as well, including such things as making sure there's a location for the training to be held, and that there's electricity, water, all those types of things, and utilities there as well. The role of training: goals. Well, the role of training and establishing goals is very important. We want to improve performance, and basically training helps us do this by doing the following: increasing self-awareness, knowledge, skill, and motivation. So by having some impact in these areas, we can see some improvements in performance, and training can help us to address those. The role of training again: global types of training. First, we have basic skills, making sure people have the basic skills required for them to be a successful employee. Technical skills, for example, new equipment, new software packages and programs. Interpersonal skills, sometimes referred to as soft skills, making sure that they can deal with people of different nationalities, different ethnicities, different personalities. Personal effectiveness, making sure that people are effective on a personal level, maybe with time management or organizational skills. And then organizational maneuvering. Probably don't hear this as much, even though it's very, very important in some sense. It's politics. Politics. Well, basically it comes down to this: political behavior. Some people are more political animals than others, but we have the individual antecedents. Some people have a political skill. They have the feeling that they can control their destiny. They are also invested in the organization, and they expect success. But the organization's antecedents are also very powerful and may have a great role to play when politics become more prominent. For example, if an organization has scarce resources, a scarcity of resources means there's only so much money to go around. That means the various VPs within the organization may struggle to try to make their ends meet for their particular unit. These scarce resources are not available to everyone. Therefore, there may be more political behavior. Other ideas are going to be things like role ambiguity, performance evaluations, promotions, democratic decision making, all can lead to this political behavior. Now, these days we see politics as a bad name, a bad connotation. It should not always be seen as such, but it is part of human nature that we want our group, our division, to be top dog, so to speak. And so by making this more clear and less ambiguous to people, it can help prepare people to understand the role of reality within their organization, that sometimes politics do matter. Training steps. Now, training steps are very important. We're going to go through the training that's required to make sure that an organization is optimizing their training events. The training steps include determining training needs, develop training program by establishing goals and objectives, choosing the best training method, preparing the training, motivate employees, and then actually conducting the training, and then finally evaluating training success. Again, this gets back to that ROI, that return on investment. If you spend X amount of dollars for training, you want X plus 2 or X2 to be there on the other end, saying that yes, we returned on our investment. We made more money based on greater efficiency, greater effectiveness due to the training that we conducted. Now, I also want to provide you an example of the type of individual who executes these steps of determining training needs, developing the training program, and so on. Here we have the first block up top, the instructional systems designer. This is from one of my former clients where I worked with them in the Ford production system. The idea here is that the ISD, the instructional systems designer, conducts most of the things that we just saw in the previous slide. Now, we can look here at the journal statement of purpose underneath the first block. Their purpose is to create training deliverables that meet the customer's expectations for quality, cost, and timeliness by following the ISD model, the instructional systems design model, with the customer's involvement and approval at each milestone. Let's go to the job responsibilities block here. So they'll determine the scope using something we refer to as a scoping document, and we see that in the next slide. The scoping document sort of sets up the stage and parameters, making sure all the parties that are involved understand what to expect of each other. Then we organize the project using a project plan. We conduct research, job, tasks, needs, and audience analysis, establishing a research report with all that information in it. Then we design the training. It's one line, but it's a big line. Design the training, instructional design outline, and storyboards. We develop materials, draft materials, for example, the instructor and participant guides, slides, simulations, role plays, all those types of things. Then we'll pilot the event materials. This is when we got all the stuff together, and then we do a run through, and then we practice it live with individuals who are skilled and trained to help us iron out the rough spots. Then we analyze the data from that particular pilot to improve it further. Then we incorporate the feedback into the master documents and disks as we get ready to execute it for the first time live to the real audience. Then let's look underneath that block to requirements in education. Oftentimes, you do not have to have a highfalutin degree to do many of these types of things. Anybody can do some of these tasks. It's very much a logical process if you have the background and basic training in certain areas. Here we see back in the day it was a bachelor's degree, 3 years of training or organizational development experience, ability to apply instructional technology and organizational development concepts in business and manufacturing environments. But the preferred degree at the bottom was a bachelor's degree in instructional technology, OD, or related field like IO psychology. And of course, experience in a manufacturing environment. Now, believe it or not, I don't have any experience in a manufacturing environment before I started working here. here being the forward production system. And many of my colleagues, when we were working together on a variety of these projects, did not have the exact manufacturing experience that they are talking about here as an automotive company, but they had the basic training in ISD and other processes as well. Here's the scoping document or excerpts from it. We see we have a project name. We give a project name to something, who's going to be the sponsor within the organization, who's managing it, who's going to be making up the project team and things of that nature, contact information, as well as what the initial requests, the initial outcomes expected. This is all up front. And then really the key thing here, determining training needs, and that is the why. What is the business need? Sometimes this is going to be coming out of the mind of a vice president or an associate vice president. But the notion is we need to want to have some sort of data, some analysis, database analysis to determine if these are indeed the training needs required for whatever issues that may be going on with this particular audience. Now, let's talk about the needs assessment. What is a training need? It is a discrepancy between actual performance and an ideal, and a norm, a minimum, a desired state, or an expected state. So you have what and where people are performing now, and it does not equal your ideal, your norm, your minimum, or desired or expected state. And the training allegedly will try to help you to address this. That is the need. You want to get people's performance the way you think it needs to be, either based on an ideal, a norm, a minimum, a desired, or an expected state. So, the analysis of need, there are four key questions. Four key questions. What are we trying to accomplish? What is your end game? Why do we think there is a need for our training program? Is there an actual need for our training program? Is our idea for a training program practical? These are some very powerful and legitimate questions. By asking what you're trying to accomplish, you're putting up there the idea, what is your goal? What is your end game? And what is it and why is it that you think you need a training program or this type of training program? And then by doing the analysis, by doing the needs assessment, you get some idea if there is actually a need out there. Again, some of the ideas may start in some executive's mind. And then when we do the research, the analysis of needs, there may not be one that they thought there was there. There may be a totally different need altogether. It may not even be a training need. That's another issue too. Not all things can be settled by training. Sometimes there may need to be some other or different type of intervention. And then finally, is our idea for a training program practical? And there can be some reasons why it may not be. The types of needs analysis. We have organizational analysis, where we establish goals and objectives, economic analysis, person power analysis, and so on and so forth. The task analysis, task inventories, interviews, performance appraisals, observations, and so on. Person analysis, performance appraisals, surveys, interviews, skills, and knowledge testing. So, organizational analysis, as I was saying, we have the goals and objectives. Now, when we talk about organizational analysis, we're basically saying the following. Organizational analysis, the process of determining the organizational factors that will either facilitate or inhibit training effectiveness. For example, if the analysis tells you that there are so many factors out there that would make training ineffective, then guess what? Don't train. The organization has other issues which are probably more pertinent and more relevant at this time to its survival than training. Training is not a solution to everything, okay? So this is what is basically asking. Given the organization, what are the factors that will facilitate and what are the factors that would inhibit training? And where are they now? Are they more inhibitory factors or factors that will facilitate? Such things as the economic analysis. What's the money situation like in that organization? Or the organizational climate. Are the employees ready for some sort of training intervention? Are their attitudes in the right place? Do they have time? Okay, will they demonstrate commitment? If these factors are in the negative, then you need to really question whether or not training is going to be the best thing for this organization at this time. Then also another key area, management support. You have an employee or employees sent off to training and they're gone for a couple of days or so, and they come back all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed to implement these new things they learned at their training. If the management level is not going to support them in the implementation of doing these things in this new way and this new procedure, then why were they sent out in the first place? You have to win these people over. You have to win management over. Management must be supportive of whatever training initiatives out there, or you will be fighting yourself. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes that's the first battle, is to try to win over leadership, to try to show them what you want to show the rest of their people. In fact, that's one of the things that I was involved in at one time, where we would train senior leadership and then plant leadership, for example, in order to get them familiar with what we wanted to train their people with, so they understood and hopefully had some buy-in to it. So management support is going to be key, as are such things as having the resources to be able to implement a training program. So, analysis of need, is the program practical? Will people participate in the program? Are the barriers insurmountable? Do we have the expertise, and do we have the funding? So some of these things would be a program killer. I mean, the idea of implementing a training program should probably be put to the side if you don't have it. If you don't have the funding, then you need to find out where you can get some money. Okay, will people participate in the program, especially if it needs to be voluntary? If you need to have buy-in ultimately to the whole thing, you want them to be eager to participate in the program. If you do find a barrier, okay, particularly at the organizational level, that is insurmountable, that's telling you that you need to deal with that more so than anything else. So, funding, resource analysis, how much staff that's going to be required, physical resources required. We'll see very soon, when I have a little excerpt of some of the logistics required for a training program that I was involved in years ago, that resources, that's a big thing. Resources tend to multiply when you're doing training programs, particularly big training programs. They require a lot of people. The larger the organization, the larger requirements are going to be made there. Okay, usually large organizations have large resources, though, to be able to accomplish it. But smaller organizations, there still will be, relatively from their perspective, a great deal of resources required to do it, and they may not have it available to them to do so. The task analysis. Job analysis identifies the tasks, the conditions under which tasks are performed, the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics needed to perform tasks under those conditions. So task analysis identifies how tasks are learned. For example, what do we expect at the time of hire? What do they know? What should they have learned already at the time of hire? What can we easily teach them? What will the current training program provide? What areas have they received no training in? So we want to know where we stand with the current individual and the current tasks that are of importance here. So look at this as an example of task analysis. So we have this banking job here, and the task would be something of this nature: answer customer questions about rates. Well, how would they learn this? Basic rate charts. So we have to be assured that they know how to read these types of things and then convey that information that comes from the basic rate charts. Process customer transactions. This would come from basic tailor training. Check load applications for accuracy. This would come from a loan processing course. This sort of starts to look almost like, for a particular job that does certain types of tasks within this bank, This is going to be like their curriculum, their course schedules, things that they need to take, okay, and also to, on a regular basis, be updated on as rules and regulations may tend to change. Then we have the person analysis. Here, we can look at needs by way of what the performance appraisal scores say. What are the areas where they are scoring low? This may indicate that whatever category or dimension that is in, where they are performing low according to the performance appraisals, this is the area that they need to be trained in. We can conduct surveys, interviews, provide skills and knowledge tests to find these things out as well. And as mentioned in the previous lecture as well, there are also these critical incidents. These critical incidents that will be able to determine, based on person analysis, the process of identifying the employees who need training and determine the areas in which each individual employed needs to be trained. So in these critical incidents we see here, we have the categories: interest in residence, availability, responsibility, fairness, self-adherence to rules, social skills, programming, and so on. They are broken down into two columns of excellent examples of critical incidents and poor examples. Really, the easiest thing to do then is say, okay, where are the poor examples of critical incidents? We see the highest one that we see here is self-adherence to rules, with 28 critical incidents on that alone. Okay, but no examples for excellent. Therefore, this is going to be one of the areas that probably needs some training, followed up by potentially availability. So this gives us a really good idea of what are the needs out there. And that's what this has all been about. What are the needs? And these are ways that we can determine some of the needs for training. So that takes us to the next stage, developing a training program. First, setting goals and objectives. What do you want to accomplish? Knowledge. To what level of knowledge do you want them to have? Just to be a generalist and know something in a general way? Or do you want them to be at an expert level, where they can easily teach a class in this particular topic? Do you want them to have knowledge that is very narrow on one specific area that you utilize, or do you want them to have broad knowledge, which may give them a little bit more flexibility in some areas? Skill. To what level of proficiency do you want them to be skilled at? Motivation. How much motivation? For how long do you want them to be motivated? Appreciation. Do you want them to understand the benefits, to appreciate diversity, different points of view, different styles of communication, and different personality types, for example? So, what do you want to accomplish? Set the goals and the objectives. Now, the goals should state what learners are expected to do, the conditions under which they are expected to do it, the level at which they are expected to do it. Goals should be concrete and attainable. Okay? Sometimes they refer to they should be a little bit of a stretch, making it a little bit more difficult than norm so they can stretch themselves. But here, goals should be concrete, black and white, so to speak, and attainable. So you want to be able to accomplish your objectives. If you can't accomplish the objectives, then that's going to be somewhat downheartening to you. It's not going to make you feel good. All right? So you want to be able to keep them motivated by having concrete, attainable, sometimes stretchy attainable types of goals so that they can achieve. Properly written objective statements include the following: action word, item, condition, and standard. Action word, item, condition, and standard. Here's an example. By the end of this training session, you'll be able to answer, action word, customer questions about loan rates, item, without asking, condition, others, without asking others, condition, 90% of the time, the standard. By the end of this training session, you'll be able to balance the teller drawer, balance, action word, the teller drawer, item, without assistance, condition, in 30 minutes with no errors, standard. By the end of this training session, you will be able to compute action word, item, adverse impact levels, condition using a calculator, standard, no errors. So then we look at choosing the best training method. Do we go with classroom training, the one that most people really can easily think about and comprehend, lecture to acquire knowledge either live or video or via computer or internet, case studies to apply the knowledge, simulation exercises to practice new skills, role play and behavioral modeling to learn interpersonal skills, distance learning using books, videos, interactive video, programmed instruction, e-learning or computer-based instruction, or the classic on-the-job training where we have modeling, job rotation where people move around from job to job to get a good feel for the different types of jobs there, apprentice training, coaching, mentoring, or performance appraisal. These are ways in which we can choose a variety of ways that we can look at the training that can be going on, and this is one that's done on the job. Conducting classroom training. Here are a few options. The classroom training options, we have lecture to acquire knowledge, live or video, case studies to apply, simulation exercises to practice new skills, role play and behavioral modeling to learn interpersonal skills, or those soft skills I mentioned earlier. I have two highlighted here. Lecture to acquire knowledge, because I'll be giving you a little bit of a history of my history about some training that I was involved in. It sort of focuses a great deal on lecture, but also on simulation exercises to practice new skill sets. So it starts off here. I want to talk about how long does it take to prepare. Well, there are a few perspectives here from Zemke to Diekman to Amat. 97, we have 30 hours of prep for each training hour. So that means you need to prepare 30 hours for each training hour live. 50 hours for prep per training hour live. 16 hours per prep for each training hour live. I was involved in training years ago at the Jaguar facility in England. This is when Jaguar was owned by Ford Motor Company. We were implementing a 5-day training boot camp over there. This is us on the Jaguar floor. I'm the lowest man on the totem pole there, by the way. So the idea is we have this 5-day training, and that would mean that we have hundreds upon hundreds of hours of prep for these 5-day training. The boot camp programs were launched in waves all around all the Ford facilities in the world. So it was a really long process, a lot of prep time. We'd be doing this in Canada, Mexico, and Europe, and England. So the idea is that it was a big deal. And so it took a lot of time, a lot of person hours to accomplish this task. Now, depending on how big the organization is and how big the training plan is, the training implementation can be huge and enormous. And you'll see from some of the slides I'll show you in a few seconds here how big it actually was. All right, so preparing the presentation is going to be a key thing. And one of the things that we see as a result of preparing for the presentation and preparing the presentation itself is what we create, what those instructional system designers create by way of training tools and training components. We have the instructor guide, for example. Now, this is an old school instructor guide where it's a printed document that just tells the instructor what to do, when to do it, to make sure they cover this point, to implement this, and how much time they have for this or that activity. We also had, as part of this training program that I was telling you about, this major simulation activity. It was a simulation activity that which we would build the conference room with all the big conference tables arranged in a variety of ways to pretend to develop a factory, an assembly plant, so that we could put together Lego vehicles. And the idea is we were trying to teach them certain processes and procedures to smooth out or lean out their production timeline for order to delivery, for quality, for first time through, those types of things. And this is what they would see. Part of their instructions would be things like this, and they would have material come into the simulated plant in the conference room, the one end of the table, and then the parts come in. They have to be moved down the production line, the assembly line, till one person here would have to use this to assemble the Lego truck and move it out. And we'd be able to look at the metrics for the day, rearrange the conference room floor with the, and when we rearrange the conference room floor, we'd be rearranging the plant to a different format to see if this smoothed out or leaned out the flow of materials to make our efficiency and effectiveness much better. All right, now, so all this is what's going on, but the prep for it was also very intense. And here's an example of the prep. This is one of the things that we use for the boot camp process. It involved 5 days, and sometimes that meant that we'd be gone for 2 weeks because some people had to go before the participants would show up at a particular location. Most of these locations were in plants that were doing things better than Ford Motor Company was doing things at the time, and they'd be like in a small town in Georgia somewhere, and so we'd have to get buses to bus people to from their hotel rooms that we would have to arrange to this factory in the middle of nowhere, so that they could go see how they're doing it at this particular facility, and then if we were lucky enough, we'd either have space at that plant or back at the hotel where we'd arrange our conference room tables in such a way to mimic a plant the way we usually do it at Ford, and then a new way that we were trying to teach them to do it to make it much more efficient and effective. I'll just communicate one term for you. It was called OTD, order to delivery. That was one of the metrics that we used. The philosophy was this, that if you went into a car dealership today and you wanted to buy a car of a certain type, let's say, but you wanted it painted a certain color, a weird color, and you wanted these details on it, and you wanted this a little bit differently, and they'd take your order, and if it's doable, say, okay, we can do that, and that order would go to a plant somewhere, an assembly plant, and they would build your car. And the OTD, the order to delivery time, was to be 15. I don't know where it is today, but that was the ideal, to say 15, OTD 15 days from the time you put your money down at that dealership till it comes back to you 15 days later. So in the old days, when I was working with these guys, it was nearly impossible for that to happen. And so that's where all this really came from, is to try to lean out systems and make things work a little bit more smoothly. So the idea here is that we have all these things, materials needs for day 3 and 4 of the event, meeting location, overhead projector back in the day, flip charts, food, everything you could possibly look for. We had to think it through to make sure, because oftentimes we were nowhere near our office building or a Ford facility. We'd be out in the boondocks somewhere in a small hotel that had sufficient conference room size so that we could do our work there and then go visit the plant for 2 days on days 3 and 4, I believe. So this is the planning and the prep stuff that went into prepping for the training of a 5-day event, and it could be anywhere around the world when we did this. So in the initial planning, we need to try to anticipate all the possible problems that could occur. What if a bulb goes out? What if extra people show up? And that happened. What if there's bad weather? That happened as well. What does the audience need? Prepare your talk, your handouts, your visuals. Sometimes people would forget things, and we'd have to expedite stuff to them. If it was local, we get someone who wasn't busy at the time to drive there, or we had to FedEx something there. We did all this type of stuff. We had practiced putting materials together before we'd ship them out to the training session. And when I was involved in the upfront training as well, meaning I was one of the presenters, we'd always be doing practice, as was the people who were doing the logistics for this as well. It was a very, very hectic time, very busy, but it was kind of fun too. The supplementing lecture, well, we have case studies to apply knowledge, where we have actual situations, and live cases are the best, meaning people actually went through something that was something that we have legitimate documentation on. This did happen, and they could walk through it. Simulations help to practice new skills. So when they would get together after they ran the first few simulations the way plants are normally set up, and realized how bad the numbers were, they would say, okay, we learned about XYZ during the lecture part of this training. Let's see about rearranging our plant a little bit differently based on the principles that they learned during the training. And then once they did that, then they would walk it through again to see if their numbers, like first time through, which is quality, or OTD, order to delivery, was correct, their build schedule was correct, so a build to schedule. So this is the way that we taught and trained them in doing this type of stuff. We also can use role play to practice interpersonal skills. We have the regular role play, but we have the behavioral modeling technique, which we did employ an additional type of training when I was consulting in Michigan. This is a teach technique where they would view videos of good and bad performance doing something. For example, let's say we were doing a train to trainer where we were actually training people to go out and train other people. They would have view videos of good and bad performances, and then we would critique those videos together. Then we would have them try to be the presenter, and then they would give their presentation, and then we would provide them feedback on their particular role play or their presentation. So that's the way it worked. And so we did a variety of these types of things all the time when I was working in the training function there at the Ford Motor Company as a consultant. Motivating employees to attend training. Now, we require attendance on the clock. That's going to be something that you can do. That doesn't mean necessarily that people are going to be happy being there. But if it's voluntary, usually it's going to have to be on the clock, just in time rather than just in case. Make training interesting. Focus on core competencies. Increase employee buy-in. Usually, one way to increase employee buy-in, it's very important, particularly when we were working in union states or union environments where there was a labor union there, having them help to develop, really help with the buy-in at their leadership so that we had no problems providing training for their people. That's something that was very beneficial as well. Provide incentives, certificates, college credit, pay increase, or food. One thing I can tell you, when we were on these long trips to somewhere in Georgia or even over in England, we ate really, really well. It was not unusual to gain a few pounds while you went on travel because the food was there and it was plentiful. One of the things that we were always trying to do is to try to reduce stress while they're attending these events. You do it if it's even going to be a day workshop, a 2-day workshop, or definitely if it's going to be a week and a half or a 5-day workshop where they're going to be away. You want to make sure they didn't have to worry about eating junk food. We want to make sure that food was there. Now, obviously, these are going to be for the larger organizations like a Ford Motor Company, a big company that has the resources to ensure those types of things. So, delivering the training program, initial decisions, who will conduct the training, in-house or out-house or external trainers, videos or local universities, they can do that as well. Some universities supplement their income, so to speak, by having training department, so to speak, associated with their college. Where will it be held? On site if you have the facilities for it. Off site, again, you have it at a local hotel. Again, it can be somewhat costly, but if you have a lot of people coming in from different locations, they're going to be at a hotel anyway. Find a hotel big enough, get blocks of rooms, get the conference room, and do your training there. That's a legitimate thing to do as well. Size of room really depends on what you're going to be doing. Seating arrangements as well. Physical aspects, lighting, temperature, noise. From my own experience, one of the things that can really upset participants quite a bit is going to be the temperature. If the temperature is out of whack, make sure that they can be fixed immediately. Types of chairs and tables, particularly if you're dealing with adults of good size, you want to make sure you don't have like those little itty-bitty elementary school type chairs and tables. They need to be comfortable for people. Again, it sounds really nitty-gritty, but it's the small stuff that really counts as well. The length of training, how long should training be? Efficiency, attention span, time away from work, massed, so like a cram, or should it be distributed? So the notion is these things, all these things, in which there are plenty, need to be thought of, and they'll be thought of by a lot of people, not just the training folks, but also other individuals too who have a stake, who are stakeholders in that particular training. Now, in preparing for classroom training, We need to also understand that you need to adjust for the audience, considerations for size, demographics, ability, readiness, options, amount of discussion, types of multimedia, the types of exercises. And it's really important to know what your audience is like. Many years ago, I had the occasion to go to the FBI Academy, where they're located in Quantico, Virginia. I was too geeked and I was just jazzed by the whole experience, but I need to remember who my audience is. I can't remember the details of the joke, but I told a joke and everybody took it okay for the most part, until this huge FBI agent later during one of the break sessions told me how he was displeased by my sense of humor. But the idea here is that you need to be aware of different populations that you may be training that may be sensitive to one thing or another. So you need to be sure, if you're telling humor, make sure it is bland, so to speak, and humor that people understand, get, and probably will not have that much of an issue with. I always advise that now when talking about that. Creating handouts, consideration for size and audience, your budget. The idea is that you just need to think of everything that your participants are going to need while you're alive in that session, because oftentimes when you're at a location that is not your building, you're on site, you won't have easy access to copiers and things of that nature. So plan ahead, plan ahead, and think of everything you possibly can by way of what needs you'll need to have available to you. Developing your presentation. What is your goal? The best approach to reach your goal. What limitations do you have? Research your topic, library, internet, interviews, subject matter experts. Develop the outline. Create or locate learning aids. One of the key things too about a lot of ISD folks is that they are experts in training design and instructional systems design. They're not experts in manufacturing or experts in this or that. Sometimes they can be, but they're not. Because really what it comes down to is that for the most part, I could be told I need to develop a training on ABC 123 project. I don't know what ABC 123 project is, but I know ISD, instructional systems design, and so you know what you need to do, who you need to contact, the subject matter experts you need to have available to you in order to begin to develop those types of training protocols and procedures to get it done for you. We need to make sure the presentation is interesting, informative, fun where possible, a variety of different types of techniques, lecture, discussion, activity, and videos to mix it up so people are doing different things and have the ability to sort of be engaged in a variety of different levels. The energy is very key, the speaker's pace, the audience activity, audience interaction, expertise sharing. That's why it's really key and important to get that icebreaker going very first off, to get people comfortable to start to talk about a variety of things. This is what is going to lead to a better result in the long run. So practicing your presentation, you simulate the presentation setting, you practice aloud, you're standing up, you're pacing around, time your presentation to make sure you're hitting all the key points, because you cannot sometimes go over. If you're on your last day of training and people are going to have to catch planes really soon, you have to make sure that you're keeping things tight, that your timing is on target, because you don't want to just stop the training before it's ready to be stopped without covering all the key items. So timing is very, very important. So memorize your opening few sentences and watch yourself in the mirror and make sure your hands are not doing too much crazy type of things. One thing that I remember we had to tell one of our trainers, even when he was doing some training, he had a lot of keys and change in his pocket. His hand would shoot into his pocket and he would jiggle all the time. We hear that chain of those keys going. We had to tell him to stop that with a little note to say, you're jingling again. All right, but the idea is that we do what we do to practice, to iron out any rough spots that we may have in the presentation. Prior to the presentation, relax, identify your fear. Solid preparation reduces anxiety. Memorize your first few lines. Be familiar with the equipment. Walk calmly to the podium. Smile at your audience and begin. Sometimes I know one of the techniques that some of the other trainers were using too is they would have these flip charts. Now we have the overheads, but sometimes you will require a flip chart, something old school, that have notes written to themselves in pencil rather lightly, so the audience couldn't see it, but you could, to remind you to do certain things when you're pacing around and walking and things of that nature. All right, so delivering the training program. What do you want to try establish your identity, who you are, credibility, personality, atmosphere, issues. How do they already know you? That has a different type of connotation to it. How long is the presentation? Who will make the introductions? The other person? Are you going to self-introduce? You usually keep it short. All this type of stuff you can sort of review yourselves. Introducing someone, just give you some pointers about what to do and how to do that. Why? Icebreakers. Well, icebreakers, I think, I used to undersell them, but they are very, very important because they can help people get into a good state for a training exercise, training activity. Get people to know one another, get them talking, wake up the audience, get them going, especially if they came in from a late night's travel and it's an early morning start. Get people to start thinking about the topic at hand. Introductions. Icebreakers can be introductions, jokes, stories, group activities. You know what I'm talking about because I'm sure you've gone through numerous icebreakers and energizers in your career so far. Making the presentation, minimal presentation skills, making eye contact, using effective gestures, not reading your presentation, and not hiding behind the podium are all key things that you need to remember. Okay, I skipped over some of the things that you can really read on your own. I want to talk about a few things before we wrap things up here. Individual training through distance learning. Basically, the categories of distance learning are asynchronous and synchronous. Asynchronous, employee complete the training at their own pace and at the time and place of their choosing. Synchronous distance learning, employees complete the training at the same time and the same place, although they may be in different physical locations. Webinars, webcasts, teleconferences, as well as Zooms, that most of you are familiar with now, are common methods of doing synchronous distance learning. Now, programmed instruction concepts. Concepts are self-paced. The training is actively involved, and the learning material is presented in small units. The formats of this program instruction can be books, videos, interactive, computer-based training, or here web-based training or e-learning as well. Now we have on-the-job training, which we talked about before as well. We have learning by modeling others. We have the characteristic model, successful, status, similarity, the characteristic of the observer, attention, retention, reproduction skills. So the person that is the model should be successful, they should be seen with some status, and there should be some similarity with the person, maybe the same type of position that they're going through, but they're a little higher level. And the characteristic of the observer, they need to be attentive, able to retain, and be able to reproduce those skills. Learning through job rotation, cross-training, as well as volunteering. That's one way that people can learn skill sets. Learning through apprentice training used in crafts and trades, usually around 144 hours of formal classwork each year, and they work with an expert for usually 4 years. Learning through coaching. Experienced employee works with a new employee. The problems, not all employees are good coaches, and if you're going to have somebody employed as a coach at an organization, they do need to be what? Trained. Coaching can lower the coach's work productivity as well, because you're spending so much time doing coaching. Some of your other job, your real job, unquote, could be at jeopardy with regard to not being as productive as you once could be if you weren't doing coaching activities. Pass-through programs and corporate coaches can alleviate problems. So the idea is that you can have other folks who are more dedicated to that type of thing, coaching. Learning through mentoring. Mentoring is less formal than coaching, but it's the basic same idea, but just a less formal version. Good mentors can be difficult to find. And learning through performance appraisal. Again, you learn by how your performance is being judged. Now, motivating employees to learn during training, it's a key thing that we try to want people to do. I'll just cover real quickly here a couple of ideas. Provide incentives. The basis for incentive: completion and degree-based, knowledge-based, skill-based, job performance-based. Basis for incentive. You provide them. Type of incentives can be self-improvement, job security, money, promotion, and advancement. Those types of things really do get people's attention. Maintain interest, usually make it relevant, make it active, make it fun as much as possible, give it some variety, have there some interaction going there, and make sure expertise are sharing what's going on so they can tell you what they have seen, expertise sharing, and then also make sure you're always providing feedback as a way to connect. And then to ensure transfer of training, there are 5 strategies, okay, to ensure transfer of training. And what we mean by transfer of training is this: when you go off to some workshop and you learn some stuff from the trainers and the presenters, and you do your level 2s there where they test you at that training workshop and you do well enough on the activity there, they want you to be able to take what you learned at that training workshop and implement it back at work. In fact, that implementation back at work is more important than anything else that you did. Even the level 2 during the training session where you pass their level 2 assessment or whatever. But the idea is sometimes that's where a lot of training fails, that there is very little transfer of training. They're not transferring it to the real place where it really matters, the organization. So here are the 5 strategies. Use realistic training programs that really make sense, okay, for the organization. 2, have opportunities to practice work-related behavior during the training, to show them, let's say you're trying to simulate the way it is back at the work, so they can have some practice doing that. All right. Also, that may be involved in what we call overlearning. So you just make it more of the way it is at work, more this, more that, therefore that they overlearned when they were in training, and so when they go back to the real world, back at their work site, then it's much easier when they were doing it. It's much easier now that they're doing it for real as opposed to when they made it more difficult during the training session. 3, provide employees with the opportunity to apply their training. 4, ensure management is supportive of the training. Now, this 4th item here is one that we mentioned earlier, saying this could be a hindrance if there is not management support. And that is true. That's why it's one of the 5 strategies for transfer of training to be working. We need to ensure management is supportive of the training. And 5, have employees set goals. Have employees set goals. Now, let me give you a really quick thing about this: ensure management is supportive of training. I'm just going to give you the gist of the story. Some of you probably already know the story already. I'll just give you a paraphrase here. There was this great trainer, and he was hired by this company to give this presentation workshop to this company, and he's introduced by the CEO of the company, and the CEO introduces the guy comes out, begins his spiel, and then he sees the CEO prepping, and he's leaving the lecture hall, leaving the facility, and the trainer guy stops, because that showed to him that the management, the big guy, the CEO of the guy, if he's not going to be willing to sit and listen to what this guy is going to say, why would anyone else be interested? Because he's leaving, visibly leaving the facility in face of all of his people. After he's saying this guy's important, listen to everything he says, and then he leaves. Okay, the urban legend goes, the trainer stops and leaves too. Okay, but the idea here is that I just want to emphasize how important it is for management to have buy-in, to be supportive of the training that's been implemented. And then finally, we'll just do this real briefly here, is evaluation of training results. The training results is going to be very important. One of the things is going to be the return on investment. What you can do, for example, is to provide some sort of metric that you can measure that you think needs to be trained, needs to be changed via the training. So you measure one group, for example, you give a pre-test on this metric, this thing that you're trying to train. Pre-test these groups here, they go through training, and then you post-test them by using certain designs here. we can learn a lot about the success of our training. So be familiar with the various ways and research designs we can use, in particular the Solomon 4 groups design here, where you have training, post-test only, pre-test training, post-test, pre-test, post-test, and then a post-test. It takes care of all the areas that we can think about, and is able for us to be able to get a really good picture of how effective our training may be. And in the world of reality, training is very difficult sometimes to measure its true impact, because there's so many real-world factors that will influence effectiveness of an organization, effectiveness of individuals. So we're not controlling everything like we would in an actual experiment, a lab experiment. This stuff is happening in the real world. Therefore, a lot of real-world factors are going to be coming at play. But the idea is that you're going to be looking at such things as the content validity, employee reactions, employee learning, the applications of training, the business impact, and return on investment. Just highlighting a couple of these real quickly. Employee reactions, we usually refer to those as level 1s. Those are the smiley faces. Those are the things too that you guys complete by way of student evaluations near the end of the term. Employee learning, that is during the workshop, for example, or training, there may be some sort of test of skills or knowledge or something that they give you in order to get some sort of documentation that you learned what you were supposed to learn, and all this type of stuff. And then the application of training back in the work world, where you're now out of your training, you're back at work. How well are you applying training back at your work site? Okay, so those are some of the key things I want to make sure that we're able to cover in this chapter on training.